ACISCM. Hello, friends. Every Indigenous, Alaska Native, and Hawaiian has the right to truth.
We have the right to know the truth about what happened in Indian boarding schools in the United States. This starts an accurate accounting of the number of our relatives who were forced as children to attend these schools.
To ensure this never happens again, we need to know the truth about how many of our relatives were abused, died, or went missing.
Every American Indian, Alaska Native, and Hawaiian has a right to healing.
Every Native person in our country carries the trauma and the harm of Indian boarding school policies in their blood and genetic memory.
To heal, we need to know the long-term impacts and implications of these institutions of racism, white supremacy, and genocide have had on our children and families, past, current, and future generations.
The irreparable harm cannot be undone, but we as a country can begin to acknowledge and reconcile. That is the foundation for a future of healing that our boarding school survivors and their descendants deserve.
Every Native citizen, Alaska Native, and Hawaiian has a right to dignity, restoration, and an opportunity to share their stories.
A Truth and Healing Commission on Indian boarding schools is a necessary first step for our country to address long overdue injustices experienced by generations of our relatives.
The time for healing is now. We cannot wait any longer. Our relatives deserve the dignity to share their stories of the harm they've suffered, the trauma, and the resilience.
Our children and families are still dealing with the generational impacts of Indian boarding schools, and we demand restorative actions that are written in a policy, as well as a direct resource that helps our tribal communities revitalize and restore our culture, language, and well-being of our children, families, and tribal nations.
We are in a time of truth-telling, so let's take action together. We ask each of you to call key congressional leaders to enact the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding Schools Policy Act,
which calls for a full inquiry and accurate accounting into the assimilative policies of the U.S. Indian boarding schools, including a full examination of boarding school archival records and the ability to subpoena documents if not brought forward.
Culturally appropriate public hearings for survivors, descendants, and subject matter experts to provide testimony and inform institutional knowledge gathering. The creation and dissemination of commission findings and recommendations shared publicly that will set the foundation for policy recommendations that work toward restoring the culture, language, and well-being of our children and families.
A comprehensive investigation that goes beyond the Department of Interior's Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative and builds upon all previous research. The time is now.
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 Please call your senators and congressional members today, requesting they pass H.R. 5444 and S.2907, the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding Schools Policy Act.